Hey, it's Bob Pulver. In this thought provoking episode, I sat down with my friend Gordon Ritchie, principal consultant at Skill Collective, and my go to expert for anything related to skills architecture, strategy, and intelligence. Gordon and I explore the complex landscape of skills in the modern workplace. We delve into crucial topics such as skills assessments, ownership, taxonomy, and the role of AI in skills inference. The conversation also covers the challenges of skills based hiring, the impact of automation on talent acquisition, and the importance of internal mobility and reskilling. Join us as we navigate the intricate world of workplace skills and discuss strategies for continuous learning and adaptation in an AI driven era. I hope you enjoy the discussion, and thanks for tuning in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. I'm your host, Bob Pulver, and with me today is my friend Gordon Ritchie. How you doing, Gordon?
I'm great, thanks, Bob. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for spending some time with us. You are the perfect person to talk about skills with. Skills is your middle name.
Yeah, Skillosopher is my LinkedIn handle.
There you go. If you would just give us a quick little, background about, how you wound up where you are in terms of, well, you can talk about location changes and your moves geographically, as well as your education background and where you've been working and
Yeah,
solving these skills problems for everybody.
the jungle gym journey, as people talk about. So it's like my first engagement with kind of skills and assessments was in my early 20s when I was struggling to figure out what I was trying to do. And my dad paid for me to go to what was an office in Baker Street in London, which was where I was living, and sit down and do a battery of tests with a psychological assessment and meet with a psychiatrist afterwards. It's like, okay, this is what your aptitude and capabilities should be, Gordon. And it was nothing to do with where I was. So a very early career change driven by assessment around skills and competencies. And the rest, as one might say, is history of kind of following that through enterprise learning for a big chunk of my career in the UK before I moved to the US out here in Washington when I started a technical writing company developing skills for people at large and through both online and classroom learning, and then got into the more specific skills side of it with a very early pioneer in skills inventory, assessment, and analysis. Whilst I was in the US, it was actually based out of the UK near Oxford, called Infobasis, and we were doing skills taxonomies in spreadsheets and building them. And that really seemed like a great idea and concept. And that's where my specific skills journey started. And we moved from acquisition to salary.com to Connexa to IBM, where I wound up ultimately owning the IBM talent frameworks as a skills taxonomy and data set. And very early, some of the Watson AI applications of that kind of data into career coaching and counseling and applications there, and how could we use that as a algorithm for that. And from there, consulting and some startups more recently around the whole AI labor market data model with Hitch that was recently acquired by ServiceNow as a talent marketplace and has been replatformed into the ServiceNow employee experience engine, and more recently with Skyhive, which is now at Cornerstone.
Cornerstone, right?
Yep, and to Skill Collective, where as a bunch of skills journeymen, I suppose, and geeks to boot, we're a bit frustrated with the hype and the false promises and the hit the easy button and skills will make it all good. So we're kind of pulling the curtain a little bit back and shining a light on some of the challenges, but really to help simplify the confusion and chaos that's in the skills market. And you know me, I'm the absolute kind of advocate of skills still. The potential is as real as it was 20 years ago when I kind of got into it. and we're really close to being able to realize that, but there's still a ways to go. But I'm in it for the ride. I've tried to get away from it a couple of times, and it keeps hooking me back in.
Yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me. I don't think some of these debates are going away, and we definitely need your expertise here. So, Skill
Yeah.
Collective, I mean, is it more like a consultancy and advisory, or do you actually build some of the skills intelligence software, or both?
We're very much a consulting organization, and basically providing three things to both sides of the coin, right? We've poacher turned gamekeeper almost. We've been on the enterprise side, we've been on the vendor side. We know the mismatch of conversations and the fears of buying the wrong thing that's on the enterprise side. So we're really providing a kind of easily accessible expertise for enterprise. It's like, okay, what's the real truth behind this question, Gordon? We're getting this insight. Or for vendors, it's like, okay, we want to put the skills sticker on our box, but we don't want to just do the low hanging fruit MVP 101 list of nouns. What is the white space, or what is the leapfrog motion that education and enablement, and if centers of excellence or expertise need augmenting, become part of that team and knowledge share, to upskill that within an organization so that they can take it and run with it. Ultimately, everybody has to have their own sense of ownership around it. Otherwise, it will, when the one advocate leaves, the project will stall. We've seen that so many times.
So, when it comes to ownership, is it learning and development that kind of owns this? Is it the CHRO? Is it maybe it depends, right? But it just seems like with the disconnect, I don't see consolidated ownership of talent and talent
Mm-hmm.
pools within an organization. And so it's hard to be consistent in how you view and assess skills if you don't have that shared view of these different talent pools. And when I say different talent pools, I'm talking about your current employee population, your contract and contingent labor,
Yeah.
and then just you know people you're trying to source to target for new
Mm-hmm.
candidates, right?
Yeah.
If there's a firewall between TA and TM, for example, it's going to be hard to do a lot of things, right? Including strategic workforce planning and lots of things.
Yeah. The fiefdoms of those kind of HR vertical practices is one of the challenges for skills, right? It's like who does own it, and it shows up in the vendor space too, because all of the solution providers to each of those verticals wants to be the system of record of skills. And it's like, why you just put it all in the hiring system, or put it all in the HRIS, or put it all in the LMS, and that'll be the system of record. And each of those needs different data elements for it. But what is the real invested interest in having that? I've been fond of saying a lot recently. It's like the skills that got us here won't necessarily get us to where we want to be. I think that skills are not the end game. So if all we're doing is trying to centralize skills, a bunch of data elements, that's not going to get us to the holy grail, which is the business of the business, right? That's where it needs to be owned and have a sense of engagement with. If it becomes its own HR process, that falls into the done to you, not for you as employees, and there's no connection to the tasks and the work that you have to do, we'll be having this conversation in another 5 years. Like, who owns it? Where does it sit? I feel like we've seen this a little bit before with DEI, right? We had an office of DEI, we had a central kind of chief diversity officer, and so we had the kind of vertical stack of paying attention to it, and that checked all the boxes, but it didn't flow out necessarily. And the last year or two, we've seen a lot of those diversity offices, not officers, but the practice of that lose funding and disappear and not be invested in as they could be because it was verticalized. And skills is broader than that. And what it's actually about, the 97% of the organization is focused on doing. It's not what the 3% who sit in HR want to measure themselves against.
Well, DEI had its own
Sure.
challenges, right? It had a branding problem. It has
Mm-hmm.
legislation and risk associated with it. And in hindsight, there were better ways to approach that because ideally, it's just part of business as usual operating procedure
Should
anyway.
be. Yes.
It should be. And so, I mean, even AI, some of the premises behind using AI, assuming you're using it responsibly and fairly, which I certainly advocate for. But in that case, it seems like if you design and build and use AI responsibly when it comes to assessing talent, you would naturally have the diversity that you were looking for. At least over time, you would, right? Because you'd obfuscate, certain fields when people are
Mm-hmm.
doing evaluations. Once you've mitigated the bias within AI, the results and the insights would show you how to further mitigate the human bias that has
Mm-hmm.
pre-existed since the dawn of time. On the skill side, I suppose there is some bias towards looking at historical data. Well, these were the skills that people had who were successful before. Therefore, we need to find more people with those skills so that they will be successful too. Probably some hypotheses that need to be retested there, or just acknowledge the fact that the nature of work is changing. And like you said, what got us here or what got us success in the past
Mm-hmm.
won't necessarily be what gets us success, moving forward. And I think that's always a danger of looking at someone's maybe prior accomplishments at a different, you know, not just a different organization, but maybe a different type of organization, a different type of culture. And as far as people that are trying to start with like a skills inventory
Mm-hmm.
and, building the skills taxonomy, is that a waste of time? Skills are constantly changing, skills needs, half life of skills, all of that is changing constantly. It just seems like that would be a never ending exercise to take your skills, well, at least to try to build like a rigid sort of taxonomy for skills because you're always going to need constant, curation.
Yeah. I mean, there's several things in that. There's like just because it's hard doesn't mean it shouldn't be done, right? The one ring to rule them all kind of skills taxonomy or global skills standard or Rosetta Stone or whatever it gets labeled as, right? I think that's a little bit of a fool's errand, or I think it's a large fool's errand actually. And I've seen and been part of a lot of effort to try and create that. I think when it comes to like skills as the currency of work, which is one of the other things that gets trotted out, the way that I think about it is we're all our own fiat currency, right? Based on our experiences and who we are, we're all different. But what we need to figure out is it's like the foreign exchange marketplace so that we can trade equitably what I want to do with what I'm able to do with somebody else who needs it doing for them. I may have skills that a bank might pay a lot of money for, and a non-profit can't afford that. But I'd rather go deploy them at the non-profit. But that's my fiat currency worth. That's my choice to a certain degree. And trying to make us all the dollar or all the euro or all the pound or whatever doesn't work. I fill up my car in Spokane and I drive to Seattle, and what I pay for a tank of gas here in Spokane is different in Seattle, but it's the same currency. I haven't even left the state, and it has different value and worth. And so we need to be able to think about that in the context of the skills marketplace. The half life of skills drives me insane as a kind of non statistic. You can't find the data to back it up. It just gets used as a kind of truth. And part of that, I think, is the skill is part of what of the current skills that won't get us where we need to be. Agile software, if I think about it, has forced us to release lots of versions of applications ever more quickly. That inner skills taxonomy that's only listing product names masquerading as skills has Python 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And those in a data science mode, unless you're being very sophisticated, would show up as unique skills and look like they're just.
Hey, everybody. Got a quick question for you. Is your job easy, stress free, and full of rainbows and sunshine every single day? Yeah, I'd say that's a big fat no. Hi, I'm David Noe, host of Speakeasy HR, presented by Payroll Partners, and proud to be part of the Work Defined community. Take a step down into my Speakeasy live on LinkedIn and YouTube, where we tackle HR and business challenges through raw, uncut, unfiltered conversations. This is HR like you've never heard it before, bold, real, and full of practical takeaways. Real guests, bold insights, authentic conversations that drive change. Catch every episode on demand through your favorite podcast platform or all the content at speakeasyhr.com.
5 is one skill and Python 6 is another skill. But the delta is tiny and they're increments of the same thing. And so Python 5 has not been invalidated by the invention of version 6.
Yep.
That's part of where the half-life myth gets created, because it's too simply calculated of skills counts when it shows up in job posts in the labor market. Well, Python 5 is now old and gone because Python 6 is the thing that's getting listed. But it's dependent on the foundational skill set and knowledge of its predecessor.
Yeah. When I think of skills inference, I think of two things. One is, can I tell by the way that someone described something, even if they didn't explicitly say they have that
Mm-hmm.
skill, I can tell they have that skill by the way they describe whatever it was that they described. But I thought the secondary sort of value of skills inference was to detect exactly what you just
Mm-hmm.
described, like to know that there is a 2 month difference between someone who's on, who's knows level 5 or version
Yep.
5 before they could upskill to be in version 6. Therefore, if you have any rule whatsoever that says if this person doesn't have level 6 or version 6, then they should be eliminated from contention for a particular role or assignment, then that's just terrible, basically. So I have to think about it. Is that part of what skills inference attempts to do, or is that just something else that any intelligent, skills solution would be able to account for?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, time is a terrible proxy for expertise because it depends on the actual application. And so lots of the inference engines will look at skills in a resume that have been in a job and the time that I was in that job for 5 years. So I must be an expert, as opposed to somebody who was in that job for 2 years. They'd be less expert. But one person could be repeating what they learned in the first 6 months over time and not really actually growing. And this is another part of where the simplicity of the skill nouns struggles going forward. The skills of the future will be about evidence, a portfolio of evidence of the tasks or the work that we've done. It's the natural language of how we talk about work, and we need to get to that point very quickly, in my opinion, because we have the capability with AI and the large language models to use the descriptions of tasks, of responsibilities, of what I've done, to be able to infer the skills behind that. It's not skills first, it's skills underneath. It's skills underwriting that. And when we're able to engage in these tools that don't say, well, list your 50 skills, Gordon, show me the evidence or tell me the tasks that you did today. I know we've joked about it in the past. Nobody goes to a party or goes home and responds to the question of what did you do today? Well, I did some critical thinking, effective communication, and problem solving, level 3. We just don't respond that way, and I hope we never will. Text messages have gone from 128 characters to unlimited, and guess what? We fill them up no end, and unless you're me, and I'm still kind of constrained into 128 characters in my head, which drives my wife and daughter nuts. But it's like, but we can do the natural language thing, and that's about tasks and outcomes and evidence, and the skills are behind that, and that's where I think we can get to and should be.
Yeah. My first instinct when I start talking about some of these
Mm-hmm.
technologies in this domain is to think of like hard and technical skills. But when I think about AI and I see the speed and trajectory of the capabilities that AI solutions are taking on, I think of two things. One is what you talked about before, like the half life of skills. If we're talking about skills that AI is
Mm-hmm.
now taking on, then maybe the concept of the skills half life is perhaps more acute
Mm-hmm.
or legitimate. This is something that we need to be aware of. But the bigger thing that comes to mind is the growing importance that if those other things are true, how are we thinking about what we used to call soft skills? So the human skills, the power skills. There's a lot of new adjectives that people are using, but the one of the adjectives that I really liked that first heard from our mutual friend Antonia was durable
Mm-hmm.
skills. These are the durable skills for the reasons that I just cited. That AI is going to come on. It's going to take some of the more not just the mundane tasks, but just the things that are repeatable. The things that we wouldn't lose human centricity, I suppose, if we were to let AI do some of those things, so that we could move on and do higher value tasks, of which I think there are plenty. There's plenty of work for us to do as we automate things and as we use AI, as our, co-pilot to, help us make better decisions or what have you. But how do you think about, I guess, the universe of skills cutting across potentially more durable skills as well as, the technical skills and then the trajectory of AI? I mean, it's sort of this confluence of, factors that makes your job, I'm sure, more complex than it already
Yeah,
was.
and I'm glad you mentioned the durable skills. Matthew Daniel at Guild Education was a very early proponent of that phrase, and so if you hadn't brought it up, that's what I was going to lean on, because I think nobody masters critical thinking. If you are a critical thinker, you are always challenging yourself, and it's a lifelong continuum of these skills. It's not, well, I've hit level 5, let's bring on the next one. I don't need to do any more development of my problem solving skills. And I think as we lean into or accept AI, whether it shows up at work or we fall into a BYO AI kind of bring our own AI to work approach, which I'm going to be interested to see how that evolves.
Mhm.
The durable skills, what is a good question to prompt? What is the critical analysis that you want it to generate something from? And how do you engage in a conversation with an obtuse tool that doesn't recognize things in the graphics that it produces because of how they're technically created? It doesn't. I was getting into an argument with ChatGPT the other day about, well, I forget which it might have been Microsoft, about an image, and it had misspelled a word in the graphic, and I wanted it to correct the spelling, but it doesn't know there's a word in there because it's just
Right.
pixels. It's how it's developed, and it just got worse and worse and worse. So it's how do you deal with that, using those durable skills to get the right things out of it? And I mean, when we were at IBM spent a lot of time talking about augmented intelligence, not artificial
Yep.
intelligence, right? I think about that a lot because I think that's quite prescient about the importance of those durable skills and continuing to develop them.
Yeah, I have had the same. argument with ChatGPT and probably at least one other generative AI tool. What I don't understand is it knew where to create the pixels for the letters, right? It put the letters in the right order. They're on the same
Yep.
horizontal
Uh-huh.
plane. It reads like a word, and yet it couldn't. Even if you explicitly say, "Here's what I want you to do. I want you to put an A, and then next to that put a T, and then next." So it understands this, and it renders it so close, and yet it just misses. Like it'll duplicate a letter, or it missed a word, or it. Most recently, I use it to try to see what images it would create for my podcast, and I put "elevate your AIQ" in quotes, and so it got that, except it did AI IQ, so two A's, two I's, and then but then it also at the bottom it had like a footnote, and it said like podcast. Like at no point did I say or did I imply that the word podcast should appear
Mm-hmm.
in the image. That's just part of my prompt, right? So it's definitely far from perfect, but that multimodal thing where letters inside images, that was just beyond frustrating.
Yes.
So I digress. I guess when I think about some of the ways in which we tackle this skills thing, I mean, one thing I wanted to do is go back to my original question around like the ownership
Mm-hmm.
and people using different sort of environments to assess skills. Like somebody wrote the job description, and then the candidate invariably used that job description and took the specific words and the specific skills from that and then put it in their resume, and then that comes
Mm-hmm.
back and it gets evaluated. And so you have this back and forth, this sort of cat and mouse game. It's kind of silly,
Yeah.
whatever.
I'll have my AI resume generator talk to your AI job post.
Exactly. Exactly. Which will then be scored by another AI when it comes back
Yep.
in. And then hopefully the human recruiters are,
Yep.
looking at that and not taking it at face value. Again, applying those critical thinking skills to say, did it overlook something, what have you. But then you get into the interview process, and you know you're going to wind up interviewing with probably several people, which none of whom actually wrote the JD, even if they have that in front of them. And then they're thinking about skills in the context of the real role as they know it, as opposed to how it's written in the JD. And it just seems like, how are we actually matching on skills? Like, we're doing what an organization might
Mm-hmm.
call skills based hiring. They just need a name for it. I mean,
Mm.
while they're still a candidate,
Yes.
you already have inconsistency in
Yep.
the actual skills that you're looking for.
I was just talking about this the other day to somebody. I mean, skills-based hiring is a great example to kind of talk about. The vast majority of skills-based hiring today is actually just skills-based sourcing. It's not skills-based hiring. It does not track all the way through the interview process to the point of an offer letter being made.
Whether you're a payroll pro or an employee wanting to understand your paycheck better, we've got you covered. Tune into It's About Payroll for expert insights on payroll trends and compliance, or check out It's About Your Paycheck, the go-to podcast for employees looking to understand their pay and rights. 2 great shows, 2 great hosts. Listen now, brought to you by Work Defined, where payroll meets clarity.
Hey, this is William Tincup. Listen, we did a series for iSolved called Heroes of HR, where we talk to HR practitioners. And these are just your run-of-the-mill, everyday, slogging it out, 300 employees in Cedar Rapids HR pros. Mostly it's centered around iSolved and what they do with iSolved, but also they talk a lot about kind of the day-to-day rigor of HR. If you're curious about that, search for Heroes of HR wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you.
To your point, even if there's assessments through the process, there's an interview and a human decision. We've just been working with a large retailer who's been doing a lot of alternative skillifying of their job descriptions, if you will. So it's not just degrees. Okay, what are the skills we need, and what are, as alternatives, equal alternatives to a degree? And they've spent a lot of time doing that. It's all great. And the net result, when they look at who they actually hire for the job, are degree holders, because the differentiator for the interviewer or the hiring manager is the brand perception of the degree that somebody holds. They haven't changed the practices, the behaviors of the decision making people yet, but now they know that they're going to work on that, and I think that's good data to have. Well, we've done this and it didn't change. I mean, what they have done is got a whole bunch more candidates for the same number of positions to fill, which looks like the talent acquisition process is being much more efficient. You put a much bigger number on top, right? And you divide it by the same smaller number, you're being more efficient with the decisions you're making. And so that looks like a great vanity metric to measure the success of skills-based hiring on, but it hasn't actually changed the outcome and behavior.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to think about that differently, or if there's any kind of metric. I mean, I don't know if there's a metric that can be pinned, certainly not directly and solely to
No.
talent acquisition in that regard. But it is interesting to look back at the patterns and see, who people wound up,
Sure.
choosing, and was it because of an actual better, skills
Mm-hmm.
match, validated by human beings, not just letting a particular matching engine tell you so. But yeah, and then how much did the degree, or should the degree really
Yeah.
matter? Does the recency of the degree
Yep.
matter? Yeah, I mean, there's different weightings that you can put on
Yeah.
that.
A couple of other things you mentioned in the kind of the question setup was what the hiring manager or the functional kind of line managers, the team managers are worried about. I don't think they think about the skills that people need, right? They think about the job, the tasks that need to get done. And we used to have, I was joking with our other mutual friend Brian Hackett the other day, right? We used to all be quite familiar with the time and motion study officer showing up and watching the job get done, the process, the output, and improving the process, grouping a bunch of those things together and calling that a job. But they understood the process and the task at hand. And for me, that's where the skills conversation has to get back to, almost. It's a kind of, let's get back to basics. What is it that needs doing? Because that's the business of the business. And that's what a job architecture needs to mirror or mimic. And when you plug skills into that, it has to support the business of the business. And I think we run the risk of running to skills-based jobs, of losing sight of the work at hand. I just need these skills. No, what you need to do are these 5 things and show up with the skills to be able to do them. And it could be Google's word processor, or it could be Microsoft Word, or whatever, like simplistic tools. But whatever it is, you need the tools to be able to deliver the outcomes, because that's what we're all here for. Nobody's here just for the benefit of our own health.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely more than just a collection of skills, just like jobs are more than a collection of tasks. But it feels like in some ways people are trying to do that sort of atomic,
Mm-hmm.
breakdown, because they can build a business case that way, a business case for automation, or in some cases AI, because you don't automate jobs, you automate tasks,
Yes.
right? And so if this job encompasses, these 8 tasks, and we can automate, at least 3 or 4 of these tasks, and we can just start making some uncomfortable decisions about the talent. It's not exactly true. I mean, I don't know. I guess it depends on the perspective of, who's building the business case, who's reviewing the business case, but there's more than dollars and cents
Mm-hmm.
involved. You can look for cost savings and cost avoidance, but you can't ignore the impact to culture, engagement, retention, and all these things. And there's very significant figures associated with those things. In fact, probably more significant since labor is your most expensive expense. So it just seems like some people are making some relatively short-sighted decisions if they go that route.
But I think that's part of the kind of ethical can you, should you side of this, right? And I think what's probably going to get more frightening before it gets less frightening is the uncomfortable reality for knowledge workers to have to quantify the voodoo that you do as tasks, even surreptitiously as prompts, right? If you're prompting ChatGPT to do something, that's a task that you're asking it to do that if ChatGPT wasn't there, you would be doing. Now, is that something that can be repeated? And therefore it's kind of removing well, I'm a knowledge worker, I'm a white collar worker, not a blue collar worker. So my work is my brain, is articulating the AI prompts, the tasks that it can do for us or help us, really what happened in the Industrial Revolution, finally coming home to roost to the knowledge work desk. And that's going to be really uncomfortable. But it's not, it's a place where many people have lived for 150 years based on education or demographics or whatever it might be, or 200 years. Pick your steam-driven invention of how far back you want to go. But
Right. I didn't get involved in that type of thing when I was at IBM, but at NBC, I certainly did because I was helping to build the automation strategy. And it was, all right, let's start going through, department by department, identifying some of the use cases, understanding what the lift is to actually, get that done. What's the ROI of that? Is it, 3 months, 6 months, et cetera? And then what do you do with that? So I wound up having to pitch this to the COO during like the strategic planning session, and some of the senior executives that were sort of coaching me were like, so you're showing that you can save, let's just say, 50 headcount over 2 years. And I'm like, whoa, no, I don't want anyone to lose their job. There's a million things that we need to get done that these people are probably capable of doing if only they had the time. And this EVP basically said, I'm not telling you we're going to cut 50 people. What I'm saying is you want to show the COO the savings and the head count equivalent savings. Take that win or anticipated win, and then tell them what to do with that savings. Obviously, he's going to want to book some of the savings because he's a COO. But propose part of your pitch should be how are you going to reinvest some portion of that savings, and that could be however you've sort of built your case. It could be maybe you want to hire some additional automation engineers. Maybe you need new software licenses, and maybe you need to upskill or reskill some of those people because if you can save a couple thousand, people hours a year, then you can potentially shrink some of these existing teams. But like I said, there's other work to do, and then you get into, like you mentioned before, Hitch with the talent marketplace and internal mobility or whatever. Like there's plenty of other things that people can do, and they have transferable skills that would enable you to actually move to another area and potentially have just as much success, if not more, if you knew enough about people's ambitions and trajectory of where those transferable skills and some of those specific domain skills could take them for another sort of win-win relationship with the organization. So,
and those circumstances have occurred for a long time, and it's always been puzzling. And the closer to the top of the kind of pyramid I've got, it's been interesting to understand some of those positioning and the kind of decision making around that. We worked on a huge project at AT&T as they were transforming themselves from a wire company with a mobile problem to a data company with a legacy wire problem. How do they reskill 100,000 pole climbing wire men into the 21st century AT&T? knowing full well that not all of them would want to, were going to make it, but how do they move that? Because there weren't 80,000 people sitting on the sidelines of the market, the labor market, ready to do what AT&T needed them to do. So how could we move that? And just today I was reading about, I guess, the preeminent tax software company laying off 1,800 people, of which 1,000 plus were not performing, at the same time with a 1,000 open headcount for net new AI and developer positions. And I'll speak for myself. Sometimes if I'm underperforming, it's a disengagement issue. It's not because I can't do the job, but if I'd had the opportunity to go do something new, like some of those underperformers might have been great candidates for the net new positions at this software company.
Yep.
That takes work to do. And if the CFO says, nope, we're going to do these two things, unfortunately, HR gets the rough end of the stick of having to execute on that and saying, hey, actually, can we spend a little bit more time in just trying to figure out how we can move some of these people? Because we're dealing with lives here. And it puts HR and talent management teams in a tough place when financial engineering of the most expensive asset, I don't know if you can have an expensive asset. It's like it's the cost center or it's an investment as an asset, whichever way you want to think about it. But
I want to take a break real quick just to let you know about a new show we've just added to the network. Up Next at Work, hosted by Gene and Kata Keel of the Devon Group. Fantastic show. If you're looking for something that pushes the norm, pushes the boundaries, has some really spirited conversations, Google Up Next at Work, Gene and Kata Keel from the Devon Group.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been in that situation before, and it wasn't, it's definitely unpleasant. I mean, the company's in such a financial conundrum that they have no choice but to let some people go. Then they're going to probably ignore what some other data might tell them anyway, because they've got to cut somewhere, and it might as well be here or whatever. But technically, on some level, they know better, even if they're not really super forward thinking, and they're not doing strategic workforce planning properly, and they're not taking a sort of a systems thinking kind of approach to the organization. So it sounds like you and I have both been the victims of that situation, and we can sort of Monday morning quarterback it and be confident that we're thinking about it logically, but you know financially it just seems like there's a lot of incentives that would need to change, not to mention the investment in obtaining that additional intelligence, because it's not like the data doesn't exist. This isn't like some
sure,
esoteric thing that it's all hypothetical or whatever. No, the data is there. You just haven't applied or invested in the
yep,
skills or the software that, or both, to help bring that to light. Because if you did, you'd probably be able to do what we just told you to do, which is shuffle the deck and then use similar
yeah,
but different technology to find where you could have been saving in other places that
yep,
haven't been getting as much scrutiny, right? So it's like you've got to look under the couch cushions sometimes, I suppose.
yeah. It's another topic for another time, perhaps. But I think if we were able to book, or if we're able to treat people as an asset, which is the lip service that gets paid, even though they're in the same breath they get listed as the most expensive item on the payroll. If they're an asset, why can't we book learning and development as capital expense, as a capital investment in improving that asset? Instead, it's operational expense and it's out the door. There's no way to amortize the return on that investment in improving your assets, which they get to do every day of the week on the buildings and infrastructure that really doesn't do anything. It just sits there and degrades unless they spend money on it. But they get to amortize it. They get to treat it as a capital asset. Like I said, it's a topic for another debate, another time. if we were able to make that one accounting change, I think we would see a massive change in attitude to how we managed and what we were able to do with the people who worked for us.
There's a lot of things that happen as a result of the way accounting rules
Yep.
work, right? I mean, just like when you're in a hiring freeze, this happens all the time, right? You're in a hiring freeze, you can't hire full-time people, but you could spend as much money as you absolutely need to on contract labor,
Yep.
right? So
Or contracting the people you've just laid off because you need the skill set, but now you can pay them as
yeah,
contractors, not as employees. Happens
yeah,
all the
right.
time, right?
It's
It's crazy.
I'll just harp for one more second on the internal mobility thing. I mean, it would be a huge oversight to think that people are leaving just because they found a job that pays,
Mhm.
a little bit more. Like if you weren't going to give them another opportunity, they wouldn't stay and perhaps stay longer than they would have otherwise and be more engaged and loyal because you've never asked them what their ambitions are. And if you did, then as new opportunities would come up, it's almost analogous in some ways on the talent acquisition side to candidate rediscovery. Like, well, they weren't good for this job, just like they're not engaged or they're underperforming in their current the employee is underperforming in their current job. But what if we knew exactly what they were looking for or what they were capable of, and then we positioned them such that we you know enable them to pull a 180, and all of a sudden
Yep.
their engagement spikes and they're happier, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean it could make a world of difference. And so I mean I went through that again at NBC. Through that automation strategy, I said, well, what jobs and what people might be most susceptible if they were to let people go as a result of automation? Well, let's start with that population in terms of who we could target for potential
Yeah.
reskilling, and then say, okay, well, have you ever thought about a more technical career, and then give them some type of assessment to see their
Totally.
potential to make that switch, because otherwise they see a dead end for their role because it can
Mhm.
be largely automated. They see the writing on the wall, and if it's not this round, maybe it's going to be the next round in 3 months or whatever. And so and they just feel stuck. And so you're showing them another path uh, forward, and that will result in a win-win. So don't keep letting people go, and then going fishing again.
Mhm.
Nurture
Yep.
the fish that you
Yep.
have.
Yes. Whilst we're using analogies, I mean, I was just thinking about it. I mean, I've been watching the Euro Soccer Championships for the last month, and the English coach has had a lot of grief about playing players outside of their natural positions. And as he's changed that and moved them across to be playing in their England have started playing better football. And guess what? We're in the final on Sunday. Maybe he's just going to let them play unfettered in their best suited positions and we'll win the whole thing. You could see it. The natural left footed players playing on the right out of place, they struggled. It wasn't where they were used to playing in a team. Put
Yeah.
people in their best place.
Yeah. Going back to something that you said in your intro in terms of you took this
Mm-hmm.
assessment when you were 20 something, and that sort of realigned
Yeah.
you to this new career path. So you really took to those results, right? You really trusted those
Yes.
results. So when we think about assessments today,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that ideally they are giving insight to the hiring team, but
Mm-hmm.
hopefully giving you as the candidate insight as well, or maybe the employee, right?
Yeah.
If you're taking assessment internally. But I guess I wonder, over the course of your work, are you seeing people use behavioral and psychometric assessments effectively when it comes to those, the durability of those human skills? Because there's a lot of different ones out there, and really any candidate, technical or non-technical, should be taking those.
Yeah.
The technical talent shouldn't only be taking coding assessments and technical tests. But
Yeah.
I guess more generally, just your take on the assessment
Yeah.
space.
The assessment space is really interesting to me this year. My prediction for the beginning of the year was the great recognition. not the Great Resignation or anything, the year of the Great Recognition, which was assessing and recognizing the skills people had, what they needed, and their progress to close that. Hard or soft skill, durable skills, whatever. Not all assessments are created equal. There are some good ones and there are some not so good ones. There's a lot of work being done on can AI equal the research and the statistical reliability that some of these other psychometric tests have had to prove, have developed for validity over the years. And that's good, but we're a long way from having the data to prove that an AI assessment of skill is as good as a pre-hire assessment that's been done to 1,000 subjects and they had all of the kind of variables factored in, and that there's a reliability fact for pre-hire assessments that industry has had to prove for the last 30 years that yes, this is a valid, unbiased assessment, and you can't sue me for using it, right, and making you take it as a candidate. We do not have anybody yet who's publishing that data on their AI skills inferences of you're a level 3 on this, Bob, and we should. Otherwise, we're letting them off the hook. And if it was an appropriate standard before, why is it not an appropriate standard today? And so the reliability and validity of those assessments. I know some organizations are spending a lot of effort in the rigor of that data and psychological validation and accuracy, but some are not. Some are just whipping it up with pre-built models out of the ChatGPT store. It's like, hey, presto, is a pre-hire assessment tool using AI.
I'm hearing candidates are using AI to actually complete assessments, which is ridiculous. That's the state of the job market, apparently, that you have to have AI give your responses, which should be coming from your human brain. You're using AI anyway.
Yeah, and that's been on a very slippery slope for a while. I mean, Goldman Sachs had their infamous kind of battery of tests that somebody leaked out a kind of algorithm tool to help get through the Goldman Sachs tests for the investment bankers. But that was probably 3 or 4 years ago. It was probably at least. And then there was well, I'm just going to have my dad sit in on my interview and he can feed me the answers to give us, like, give me a break. And now we just get that my AI agent will talk to yours and tell me when I should come in and you can make me an offer.
Yeah, there's all kinds of sneaky stuff going on. In terms of the assessments and using AI and what have you, I mean, obviously I've been spending a lot of time in the responsible AI space, and I've been learning a lot about the assessment space between my time with Lumini and talking to folks like Charles Handler and others. But the fact that from a legislation standpoint, it's really about using AI or some algorithm to come up with some type of score or stack rank, etc. I don't know how you can say it's not part of the decision making process, because it clearly is. But are they circumventing it by not coming up with a score?
Probably. If it looks like a duck and it sounds like a duck, it's probably a duck. So yeah, probably. But I think, I mean, they're all full of the disclaimers of don't make your decision only on this data. It's all those kinds of things also in terms of pushing off the liability. But if you're going to make recommendations, you've got to have some skin in the game. You can't just say, yeah, go smoke this cigarette, it won't hurt you. What do you mean? It's going to come back and bite you at some point.
So Gordon, I think we talked for longer than we anticipated. My little counter here is definitely off, but no, it's obviously been a great, engaging discussion. I do have one final question for you, of course, because I ask it of all my guests. But when you see the phrase "elevate your AIQ," what advice do you have for people to elevate theirs, or what comes to mind when you hear that phrase?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, multiple sources is research. If you only go find one place, that's plagiarism, right? If you go to multiple places to find things. That's learning and research. So I think my comment is to go look around. Lots of conversations about AI. It isn't all the doom and gloom. There are some really interesting, even just in your daily life things. It's not all about work either. So find something. I mean, I mentioned the BYO AI. I mean, and maybe that's where we're going to find real momentum. Is we'll bring our own tools of choice and our own AI to what it is we need, whether it's planning a holiday or putting a PowerPoint together. It's like skills. Start, try it, experiment. I'm behind the curve on many people, but I'm ahead of it on a lot of others in terms of how I choose to engage and use it and find its frailties and argue with it about its inability to spell in graphics. It's like, am I really? I'm that invested in this? It's like, apparently.
Excellent. No, that's good advice. I agree. All right, Gordon. That is it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been great.
My pleasure. It's been a great discussion.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And we'll see you next time on another episode of Elevate Your AIQ.
Thanks, Bob.
Bye for now.